I couldn't wait for this because years ago when I was with the Bucks and Jerome, my running partner at the University of Miami, Jerome Brown was in Philadelphia. Ray Didinger was kind of the voice of Philly, and we get Angelo on each and every single Monday. He says, "You want to talk about Philadelphia history and Eagle history," which is awesome because how I met Chuck Bednarik was through my legendary uncle Andy Robustelli, and that's how I met Chuck. And Robustelli, of course, introduced me to Chuck Bednarik and all that. I used to get concrete on, "Hey, Silio, how you doing?" And I was going, "This guy went to Penn?" Without further ado, truly one of the great sports talk hosts. We've had last week, we had Howard Eskin on. We get Angelo on, like I said, but we have to really welcome in here Ray Didinger. We really appreciate him taking time with us. Ray, man, I mean, I've been trying to get you on. I know you're a hot commodity, people wanting to know what you thought of the game on Sunday, and thank you for doing this.
Always a pleasure, Dan. Nice to see you again.
You bet. You know, I mean, Jerome used to talk really great things about, because him and Reggie were like, you know, they were like two brothers, and, you know, you were really great friends, especially with Reggie. And I have to ask you out of the gate here, as much as I like Gang Green, that was in my era. What you saw on Sunday, was that the greatest performance you ever saw in a big game by a Philadelphia Eagle defense?
Yeah, probably was. Probably was. I mean, you could cherry pick a couple of games from the era you were talking about. I mean, the 11 sack game of Troy Aikman down in Texas Stadium, where at the end of the day, Mike Golick had more sacks than Reggie White. I'm still trying to figure that one out. But, I mean, that was obviously a big defensive game. And, you know, the body bag game when Eagles then Redskins at the Vet on a Monday night, pretty memorable. But talking about that kind of a defensive performance in a Super Bowl with the whole world watching, yeah, I think that's about as good as it gets. That was a pretty amazing performance to get that kind of pressure in that kind of a game with just a 4-man rush and no blitzing. It was really something to see. I mean, I thought the Eagles would win. I picked them to win, but I certainly didn't expect it to go down like that.
I mean, they made him look like Sam Darnold in that game. I mean, I'm talking Mahomes. I mean, it was just an absolute onslaught there. I mean, it was – I thought I was watching Sam Darnold. I'm like, that's Patrick Mahomes. Holy cow. I mean –
I actually could go you one better. I mean, when I was watching it, I was thinking Christian Hackenberg.
Oh, my God. Holy cow.
I mean, to see – I really never thought I would see Patrick Mahomes look that overmatched. And he clearly was. And right from the beginning, I mean, you could tell right from the beginning that, you know, we've seen the Chiefs before start a little slow, but then there's always that feeling, you know, Mahomes is going to figure this. Mahomes and Andy will figure this out. You know, they'll hit a couple plays, they'll get it rolling. You never got that feeling on Sunday. I mean, you got the feeling that the Eagles had them fully by the throat right from the beginning, and that they could have played 8 quarters and it wasn't going to change.
No, absolutely not. Angelo on Monday called this Eagle team the greatest Eagle team in the Super Bowl era. I'm not going to go back 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s to the Bednarik team in the 60s. But do you think this is in the Super Bowl era? This is the best Eagle team that you've ever seen?
Yeah, probably I'd have to say so. Yes, I would. I mean, if you wanted to go back through the whole history of the franchise, I mean, all the way back to the foundation, I still think the 1949 team was probably their best. That team was 11-1. And here's an amazing stat for you, Dan. In a 12-game season, the point differential for the season, they outscored their opponents by 200 points in a 12-game season.
Wow.
I mean, you talk about domination. That was total domination. 33-man roster, 4 of those guys in the Hall of Fame, head coach in the Hall of Fame. It was, I mean, Van Buren and Bednarik, all those guys. I still think, I've always thought that was the best team. I probably still think that's the best team. But if you want to just talk Super Bowl era, modern era, got to be this. I mean, 18 wins, 10-game winning streak, team record, and then that kind of a one-sided Super Bowl victory against a 2-time defending Super Bowl champion. I mean, it's not like you caught some lucky wild card, a 6th seed that found its way into the Super Bowl. I mean, you were stepping in with the heavyweight champ, and you took him out. So yeah, I think by just about any standard you want to apply, this would have to be the best team.
Well, let me throw and go one further here on you. The 85 Bears, 86 team in the Super Bowl, the 86 Super Bowl, when they beat the Patriots and held that Patriots team to 7 yards rushing. Was this the best performance by a defense that you've seen in the Super Bowl era by any team? I know that the 49ers, that 55 win, 55-10, I believe it was, over the Broncos.
Mm-hmm.
You go back, it's kind of hard, but boy, Ray, I'm telling you, those Steeler teams were awesome in the playoffs. But, you know, the Rams in the 80 Super Bowl, they put up points against them. I'm trying to think of a team that had a better performance outside of that Bears team. And is this the best you've seen a Super Bowl defense play?
Well, you mentioned a couple of them. I mean, the 85 Bears were they were great for the entire season. I mean, and then they just absolutely crushed New England in the Super Bowl. I will tell you that I still think that the Steel Curtain, when it was at its best, was the best defense I ever saw. I remember their Super Bowl, the first one they won against the Vikings, also down in New Orleans, they held the Viking team with Chuck Foreman and a really good offense, held them to like 10 yards rushing for the whole game. And then there was another Super Bowl with that same Steel Curtain team where they beat the Cowboys, a great Cowboy team, and sacked Roger Staubach 7 times. I thought those were to try and say one's greater than the other. I think that's kind of hard to kind of
because the eras.
Yeah, I mean, because the game has changed.
Yep.
It's a whole lot different game today than it was in the 70s and the 80s. But if you're talking about the best defensive performances in the Super Bowl, I think that what the Eagles did this week. I mean, 6 sacks of Patrick Mahomes has never happened before. I mean, it never been sacked 6 times in any game. To do that in a championship game like this and make that whole offense just shut down, that's got to be mentioned in any great Super Bowl defensive conversation.
Ray, help me out on this one here because, you know, sometimes I try to explain to people when you say the best quarterback in the league, some people confuse talent with resume.
Mm-hmm.
I compare Aikman and Hurts to pretty much kind of what they're both were asked to do. Troy won 3 Super Bowls inside of a system with guardrails on it. He was one of the most successful guys, 5 conference championship appearances. He's a Hall of Famer. He had a Hall of Fame running back, Irvin on the perimeter, Harper in the best O-line. When I look at Hurts, can 2 things be true here? Hurts may not be Allen or Lamar. Those guys are just so athletically gifted. But then now when you start talking about resume, you cannot not mention Hurts any longer because then you throw the resume in. 2 NFC championships, 6-3 in the postseason, Super Bowl. How do you differentiate between who the best are and who the more accomplished are? I mean, because am I off base here with this? No.
I think you're right, and I think it's it's something that everybody has their own definition of it. Everybody has their own how they perceive things and how they rate different players, and a lot of times people go straight to the stats. They go straight to the analytics. They go straight to passer efficiency rating, quarterback efficiency rating, average yards per attempt, completion percentage. You know, I mean, all those things that you can feed into a computer, which is fine. I mean, if that's how you want to rate players, then there's just the idea of I'll just go with what I see. I'll just go with I can watch the game and I can kind of determine who can play and who can't. I don't need a whole lot of numbers to point me in the right direction. And Jalen Hurts, I mean, if he plays 10 more years, which he probably will, I mean, he's never going to lead the league in yardage. He's never going to lead the league in touchdown passes. But he very well may lead the league in wins.
Yeah.
And if you really want to get right down to the essence of quarterbacking, that's kind of where it's at. I mean, I remember when I was at NFL Films, doing an interview with Terry Bradshaw. and we talked about this very topic. And Bradshaw said, you know, if you look at the all-time list of quarterbacks, how they rate them, and it is by quarterback efficiency rating. He said, I'm somewhere like 88 or something. He said, I mean, all of these guys, you know, Neil Lomax is ahead of me, and Jimmy Garoppolo's ahead of me, and you know, all these other guys, Tim Rosenbaugh is ahead of me. You know, both Hasselbacks are ahead of me. But you know, I have 4 Super Bowl rings, and Bradshaw said, you know, if you want to go by numbers, if you want to go by stats, I'm not your guy. But he said, and this is Bradshaw talking. He said, but to me, I'm going to judge quarterbacks by 2 things: did they score points, and did they win games? You know, all the other stuff is just stuff. Yeah. I mean, it really comes down to, did he score points, and did his team win games? He said, I think that's how you measure quarterbacks. And he said, by that standard, I was pretty good. And he's right. He's right about that. Now, if you have any kind of discussion like you and I are having about the great quarterbacks of all time, you could talk for an hour without ever hearing anybody say Terry Bradshaw. Right. He'll never be in that conversation. Yet, you look at what he accomplished and played in the big games, it's right there. And I think that, I mean, obviously, Bradshaw and Hurts are very different kinds of players, but the bottom line is kind of the same. They're going to score points, they're going to lead their offense, and they're going to win games. And when you get right down to it, that's not a bad measuring stick for quarterbacking.
No, absolutely not here. That leads me to this now. Nick Sirianni. You know, the hiring of this coordinator coming up, I think, is going to be essential to the team's success because, you know, the revolving door that the Eagles have at that coordinator position, I mean, Jalen's not going to be working on his 9th coordinator in 8 years, counting college play and all the coordinators that he's had. And as you know, Ray, I mean, look at some of the quarterbacks around the NFL. Andy Reid, 10 years with Mahomes almost. You know, Love's going to have he's going to have Matt LaFleur up there. He's going to have him his entire career. Kyle Shanahan's probably going to be with Purdy, and on. You've got stability at that. You don't have stability, which means you're going to get increment of increasing of what this guy can become. Maybe he never fulfills it because of all the turnover. You know, Nick Sirianni, I look at him and I go, last year was a disaster at the end because he had 2 bad coordinators. How do you look at Nick? I mean, 700 win percentage. Jesus, only like Madden and a couple other guys that have that. How do you look at him in this process? Because nobody would ever say this. The coordinators were not responsible for the victories this year. They were, both Vic and Kellen. Kellen got a job. There was Nick. What was his job in this whole process?
There's no doubt about that. And I've always thought that, and I'll take it even one step further, Dan. When people are evaluating football teams and coaching staffs, mostly and obviously people will focus first on the head coach. I understand that. And, you know, the more enlightened fan will start talking about the 2 coordinators. And nobody goes much beyond that. Nobody talks about the position coaches. And man, from having been around football a long time, I've been to a lot of training camps, watched a lot of practices. They are so the forgotten soldiers in football is those position coaches. Now in Philly, it's not quite that way because Jeff Stoutland has become like a superstar. Okay. But that's only because the offensive line has played that way. And these guys have kept giving all the credit to Jeff Stoutland. So people know who he is, but all these other coaches, I mean, they're out there and they're working their butts off. And every day on the practice field, when you watch it, it amazes me. It really amazes me when I travel around the league and watch practice, how little time some staffs, not this staff, but some staffs spend developing their players. You know, it's like when you're in high school, coaches are developing their players, trying to teach them every day because they're kids. You get to college, still kind of the same thing. They'll continue to try and develop the players, make them better every day. But it seems to me so often that when guys get to the NFL, that part goes away. And it's all about game plan. It's all about strategy. It's all about this and that. But you don't see the day-to-day, down in the dirt, grassroots, developing the players and trying to make them better from day to day to day to day. And I think that is so wrong. I mean, just because a guy gets to the NFL doesn't mean he should stop developing. And really good coaching staffs with really good teachers, you can see it in the players. A guy is at this level 1 year, comes back the next year, he's here, and then he's here. Those are the teams that win. They don't just bring new guys in all the time and just let them, you're in the NFL now, you know what to do, go do it. No, every day, football is a sport where every day you have to work guys and you have to teach guys and you have to demand a lot from them and to get them to improve and get better every day. And some coaching staffs have that, and a lot of coaching staffs shockingly don't. But the teams that have it, they're the teams that win. I mean, I remember being out in like on the West Coast. I was out there a lot during the 49ers glory years. And that was the kind of staff that Bill Walsh had. Yep. I mean, they really developed their players and they really worked the players on the practice field all the time. And those coaches were teachers. And I remember the first time I went out there, Mike Holmgren was still the offensive coordinator. Bill Walsh was running the team, but Mike Holmgren.
Bob McKittrick was the O-line coach out there. I mean,
yes, Bob McKittrick, and McKittrick was a great coach. But I remember the first time after one of the practices, sitting with Mike Holmgren and talking to him about how the West Coast offense worked and how it was taught and how they worked it every day on the practice field. And I remember I talked to Mike for like 45 minutes, where he walked me through the whole offense. And I remember walking away and saying, I never met this guy before, but after 45 minutes, I said, this guy is going to be a great head coach someday. I mean, I just had that feeling because he was such a good teacher and he explained things so well. And I think that when you talk about coaching, everybody assumes that at the NFL, it's the best of the best. And in some ways it is, but in some ways it's not. But I really do feel that having been around good teams, that the best teams have the best coaching staffs. And I don't just mean the guy at the top or the two coordinators. I mean the best coaches all the way down, because they get the maximum out of their players. And I really do think this Eagles staff is really, really good. I think they really do a good job. And you saw this year with these two coordinators, when Vic came in, the difference that he made on that defense, oh my goodness. I mean, I don't know. I mean, we know Kellen Moore is gone. I have not heard anything about Vic Fangio. I mean, Vic's 66. I mean, he's always been wanting to win a Super Bowl ring. He's got it now. Is there any chance he might just walk away?
Yeah,
I don't know. I mean, nobody's really kind of asked him that question. It's just kind of out there. But I mean, I hope he comes back. And I think that with that wonderful nucleus of great young players on that side of the ball, I kind of think Vic's going to want to keep working with them. But I don't know. I would hate to think that the Eagles would be in a position where they'd have to once again replace both coordinators, because, that's tough for any team to do.
Absolutely. Two last ones here for you, Ray. Help me out here on Howie. I wrote down some of the people that you and I know or knew when it came to the type of coordinator or the type of general managers that would end up in Canton. Ozzie Newsome more as a player. Then he also did great things in Cleveland and in Baltimore. Gil Brandt, Tex Schramm kind of revolutionized really drafting off of what Paul Brown did. Paul was the original game film guy and all that. Polian built those Bills teams, got the Super Bowl in Indianapolis. Bobby Beathard built the teams in Miami. He was a personnel guy. Then, of course, went to Washington and built those teams there. George Young built those teams. These guys are all in the Hall of Fame, and Ron Wolf. Howie now is a two-time Executive of the Year, two-time Super Bowl champion. To me, I think the magic with him, though, is the owner. The owner is the guy, Ray, that puts the money up front and allows him to be able to manipulate that salary cap so that you can have lower cap hits. If it's not for Lori's the only owner I see. Everyone goes, how are they doing it? Well, he gives them the bag of money. And Ray, I tell people at the end, players they don't want guaranteed money down the road. They want money in the bank now. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's always enticing. Hey, I'll give you 30 now if you can give me 10 on a base instead of 15 on a base. That's how he manipulates it. He's been better since he came out of the broom closet. He went on that thing with R.C. Slocum, who ran the Spurs, and it looks like he's a better listener now than he was before. How do you see him, Howie Roseman, now? I mean, he's better since he got his job back after the whole Chip Kelly thing, right? I mean, is Is he really been recreated here from the time before that? Because he seems better to me now.
Yeah, I think so. I really do. And listen, he's a smart guy, and he's been doing it a long time, and he's learned. And in some ways, he's learned from his mistakes, but he's learned. I mean, there's some people that never learn from their mistakes. Right. There's some people that just keep making the same mistakes over and over and over again. And then there are the guys who are smart, like Howie, that recognize, no, that's wrong. I got to change that. I got to do it differently. Like I thought that, and to your point, at the beginning of this conversation, is he approaching Hall of Fame territory? Yeah, he is. I mean, you mentioned 2 times Executive of the Year. I'm sure he's going to win that at least a couple more times. He probably should have won it this year. I mean, this was his best year, and he didn't win it. But, I mean, he'll win it again. This team could win it a couple more times. He's already done something that only 4 other general managers have done, which is win multiple Super Bowls with different quarterbacks. I mean, that's, you mentioned George Young. He did it. You mentioned Al Davis did it.
Bobby Beathard did it.
You mentioned Beathard did it, and you mentioned Ozzie did it. Ozzie won one. Ozzie won one with Joe Flacco, and people forget he won one with Trent Dilfer.
Right.
So, and all of those guys that we just mentioned are in the Hall of Fame. Well, Howie's right there now. So, and he's still a relatively young guy. So I think it's real possible that he could get in. But one of the things that I've noticed about Howie, and when he first started, when he first got the power, when he first moved from the numbers side to the personnel side, and he ran his first draft. His first draft that he really ran was the Brandon Graham draft. And one of the things I saw when I was looking at the guys he was drafting, on balance, I mean, Brandon Graham turned out to be a great player, but on balance, it wasn't a great draft. But one of the things that he did, and this couldn't have been a coincidence, was, I mean, all of these guys that he drafted, the Daniel Teo-Nisham and Jamar Chaney and the kid Clayton and all these guys, if you looked at their combine numbers, like they were all like combine guys. Like, they scored high in the bench press. They scored high in the cone drills. They scored. And I thought that it isn't an accident that you look at all these guys in the draft and they all were combine guys. And sometimes those numbers can help you, but sometimes they don't necessarily tell you if a guy can play football. And I think early on that Howie leaned on those numbers a lot, and I think he allowed himself to fall in love with guys at Indianapolis that didn't turn out to be nearly the players they thought they were going to be. Now, after having been through it for not just years but decades, I think now he's begun to see that the real answers lie on the tape. There's not a question of how fast does a guy run. The question is how well does he play. And I think that Howie is now, I mean, he still does the combine and he still looks at those numbers, but I think he now has a more practical application of what I'm looking for in a player. What kind of his skills does he have? How competitive is he? How well does he play in big games? How well does he play against really good competition? And you don't find those answers out in March in a pair of shorts. You find those out during the season in real competition. And I think Howie has become much better at that. And he's also surrounded himself with a bunch of scouts who know what they're doing, and he listens to them. So, he's learned a lot in what he's been doing. And right now, there's no question he's the best of the best in the front office, and the Eagles have been the beneficiaries of that.
All right, Ray, I'm going to end it with this. Angelo told me you got the encyclopedia of Eagle history here. Is there going to be like a chapter in the golden era here of Jalen Hurts to be added here? Surely we're going to be adding to the history of the Eagles here. You have to be updating that, no?
I'm writing it right now.
Right.
There have been, Dan, I've written three versions of the book. Is called the Eagles Encyclopedia. It is literally the Eagles Encyclopedia. And I've done 3 editions of it. One was after the first Super Bowl the Andy Super Bowl that they lost in Jacksonville. I did 1 edition of it then. That was the first. I did an updated version about 10 years later when Chip Kelly was here. And then obviously I did one after Super Bowl 52 when they actually won it. And so now I'm rewriting the book again because of what happened on Sunday. So yeah, I mean, it's from a writing standpoint, it's probably the biggest challenge I've ever had, because I'm going to have to rewrite a 480-page book, and my deadline is March the 7th. So that's, you're talking about being up against it. I'm up against it, but
so no emails to Ray Didinger, Sileo, until after that.
That's I listen. If it wasn't you, Dan, I wouldn't have done this thing, because I am literally, if you could see around me, I am just in a sea of papers, and I'm going to be living in this until March the 7th. But you know what? It's such a great story, and I never get tired of telling it. And to be able to pay this thing off with 2 Super Bowls in this period, in 7 years. I mean, who as a native Philadelphian, who was a longtime Eagles fan, ever thought would see this day? So, I mean, it's a lot of work and it's a lot of sleepless nights, but in the end, it's who doesn't love a book with a happy ending? And we sure got one Sunday.
Absolutely. Ray, I can't thank you enough. I hope we can do this again, man. That was absolutely awesome stuff. Thank you again for taking time out of your extremely busy day. And really, man, I really appreciate you doing this. Thank you, sir.
It was my pleasure, Dan. Anytime. Take care.
You bet, my friend. Ray Didinger. Awesome stuff, my guys. That was really great. Please do me a favor and hit the like button there. We so appreciate it. You guys have been great.